Welcome to episode 137 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. We're here. It's Tuesday, January 19th, recording this. Got our reactions, some thoughts, a few days after the fact to the Ravens' playoff loss to the Buffalo Bills, 17-3. For everyone outside of the city of Baltimore and the city of Buffalo, this was probably a snooze fest of a game. The rest of us that are fans of either team, it was the most nerve-wracking, frustrating, just one of the worst, most uncomfortable playoff games you could possibly watch. And here we are a couple days after the fact. The Ravens come out as losers. There's a lot to get into, a lot to try to dissect. A lot of hot takes, maybe. I don't know. I usually don't get them from me, but we'll see, especially a few days after the fact. But a lot floating around there in the Ravens fan base right now, and I think we'll try to address most of them, or at least the ones that have some validity. I'll say that because there's some that I'm not even going to entertain right now. They're so ridiculous. But just to start, from my summation here, we had an entire season worth of mistakes in one game on the Ravens' part. And the Bills' part, too. I mean, they had their mistakes less so than the Ravens, but still not the most clean game for them. The Ravens, though, from penalties to 2 missed field goals to a shanked punt by Sam Cook to consistently bad snaps by the center, poor overall offensive line play. The list goes on and on and on. And some of these penalties, I mean, I don't recall having an illegal formation penalty, if you can take that as a consolation prize based on what we saw this season. But some other stupid penalties that replaced what could have been an illegal formation, one of which a false start on your long snapper, Morgan Cox. I've never seen that. In all my years watching football, I've never seen a false start called on the long snapper. You very rarely see it on any punt, but the long snapper, I mean, it was just that kind of game. Nothing was going right, and you're just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for them to get all of this out of their system and turn the corner. Because, hey, the entire first half when this is going on, the Ravens are only down 3 points. You know, like I said, the Bills made some mistakes of their own. The Ravens defense was playing well. The game is right there. You're saying, all right, just get all of this BS out of the way and let's roll. And it never happened. It was, we always talk about, what's the cliche, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Well, this was like 1 step forward and 5 steps back. You know, they didn't go 3 consecutive plays without making some just mind-numbing mistake in this game. And that's sort of the summary of the game from my perspective.
I wasn't surprised by the fact that they lost the game, but I was kind of upset and kind of surprised that they only scored 3 points and made several fundamental mistakes, as you said. Like, yeah, I mean, if they had gone out there, in the fourth quarter or overtime, and it's a 27-24 game, and they give them a nice fight, but come up just short. As frustrating and as heartbreaking as that would have been to watch, I mean, at least you can feel good about that. I mean, you can't feel good about anything coming out of this game. I've had a quick look at Lamar's stats in the playoffs, and we're going to get to what happened on offense. There's a lot of blame to go around. I think it's a shared thing. There's some on the front office. There's some on Greg Roman and the coaching staff. There's some on Lamar. There's a lot on the offensive line, especially after what we saw on Saturday night. But in Lamar Jackson's young career in the playoffs, he's 1-3 with 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 5 fumbles, with 2 of them lost. And the key stat for me here is in 4 playoff games, he's been sacked 19 times. That is absolutely ridiculous. That's basically 5 sacks a game, and that's basically what we saw. I believe the Titans had 4 or 5 sacks last week, and Buffalo had 4 sacks this week. That's just completely unacceptable. I get that, these guys, this isn't like a superstar offensive line. They lost Marshall Yanda. They lost Ronnie Stanley midway through the season. I understand that, but you can't be having your center snapping the ball underneath Lamar Jackson's feet or a couple feet above his head where he has to make a diving or a reach for it, 5-6 times a game is what it seemed like. And that, Lamar getting injured, the concussion, that only happened because it was complete ineptitude by the offensive line in the center, Patrick McCary, who is a pro football player that's apparently gets rattled by about 6,700 Bills fans, not nearly the full effect that what you would get in a full stadium. That is not an excuse for me whatsoever. I know there was wind, but that really shouldn't have been impacting the offensive line and McCary as much as it was. But as good as this offensive line has been, and as historic as they are in the running schemes and how much they've executed, for all the good that this offensive line has showed despite the injuries and despite the retirement of Marshall Yanda, I mean, time and time again in the playoffs, they are getting pummeled. And that is probably among a long list of things that I think they need to address this offseason. Center/interior offensive line is definitely up high on top of the list. I do think that, having Stanley back next year will not to look too far into the future, but having him back will be a plus. But whether it's the center, right guard, I know Bozeman has played well at times at left guard, but he still tends to struggle in pass coverage at times. The interior offensive line is a big problem. They can hide it through their scheme sometimes and all the extra blockers they have, but it's not going to get it done. And the biggest storyline that I think I took out of this was, and I've heard several people say this, you can have this historic rushing game, this historic rushing attack. You can have a defense that's going to finish in the top 10 in the NFL. Most times that'll get you into the postseason, and it certainly did. And I'm glad that the Ravens got over their playoff hump and won a game with this group of players. But if they want to win, a string of games in January and ultimately reach a Super Bowl or win one, they need to do drastic improvement, drastic work to the receiving core, the passing game, fixing the offensive line and figuring out a way to get Lamar Jackson some more weapons and at least scheme up more of this passing game, develop it more, I think is a top priority for the Ravens this offseason.
I would agree with pretty much all of that. To the point of the offensive line, that if you're picking a position group, one area to blame for this game, we don't really like to do that. There's a lot of blame to go all around, and that's kind of the theme that I want to have for this podcast, at least in my opinion, is that blame is distributed all around. There's no one singular person, player, coach, whoever that you can blame for this loss or this entire season, obviously. And I think that should kind of put a pin in all your hot takes that you're seeing out there. Oh, if we just replace this one person, that'll fix everything. Oh, if we just add one player here, that'll fix everything. It's not that simple. So, to the offensive line, it sucks that you don't have your best offensive lineman in Ronnie Stanley. But they haven't had him for a majority of the season. And they played pretty well as a unit down the stretch without him. They also played really well down the stretch without their best blocking tight end, who's in this offense that the Ravens run, pretty much a glorified offensive lineman, Nick Boyle. Didn't have him. You adjusted to it. They looked pretty damn good in the final 5-6 games of the season, held up okay, decently well in the Tennessee game. You didn't like the sacks, but overall they did their job. This time around, it was just a complete failure on all levels. You had the bad snaps from the center, Pat McCary, who, by the way, is the starting center because Matt Skura couldn't snap the ball earlier this year. So it's not even the same guy. Matt Skura had snap issues earlier this year. One of the games was the Patriots game where it was a torrential downpour, and you're thinking, okay, maybe the rain has something to do with it, but he also had snap issues the week prior or the week after when the weather was fine. So he's out as the starting center because he can't snap the ball. The coaches lose confidence in him. Pat McCary steps in, who has been a serviceable backup lineman so far in his career. Last year he stepped in, did well. This year steps in because of performance and does holds up fine until the biggest game of the year when you need him most, and he just can't. The ball in the shotgun snap, the one never even leaves the ground. It just slides across the turf. Besides him, I thought Ben Powers played a awful game, got beat consistently. Tyree Phillips in there, he wasn't in there often, but he had one of the biggest mistakes of the game. Took a touchdown off the board, in my opinion. Right before Lamar's pick six, Hollywood was one-on-one with a defender, had great positioning, good route. Lamar wanted to hit him. He saw him because he ended up throwing the ball there. But Tyree Phillips just decided not to block the guy right in front of him, Jerry Hughes. And then J.K. Dobbins whiffed on the safety valve block. He was right in Lamar's face before he even had time to think. And that should have been a touchdown right before what was the game-changing play, which we'll get into here, the pick six. And, I mean, that was the game right there. Bills took a 10-3 lead out of the half. Ravens get the ball right back, start moving the ball again, putting together a good drive, eating up some clock. They're rolling. They get in the red zone. You have that frustrating play I just described where it's like, my God, like, just I can't get over watching that play. What the hell is Tyree Phillips thinking? Goes to help the center, goes to help McCary double team the nose tackle or whoever's in the middle, and just lets Jerry Hughes go on. I don't understand. I really don't. I can't. I watched that play over and over again. It makes zero sense. And it should have been a touchdown. Doesn't excuse what happened next, but it makes it more frustrating. Lamar throws the pick six, and it changes the entire game. You're down 7 to down 14, and I said it as the guy was running free into Ravens territory. He's going to take it to the house. I said, that's the game right there. I mean, that I don't care. Lamar's healthy or not, finishes the game or not. That was the game right there. The Ravens weren't coming back from that. First red zone interception of Lamar Jackson's young career. Once again, same thing as McCary. No issues up until this point. Just so happens to happen in the biggest game of the season. Lamar Jackson, no red zone interceptions in his career. Just so happens the first one comes in a playoff game. That's the NFL. It sucks.
The game wasn't completely over. I mean, there was still enough time, hypothetically, for the Ravens to come back. But judging off what you saw, the offense struggling so much in the first half, mustering 3 points, should have gotten 9, but they can't get 2 of those field goals. It's not completely over at that point, but judging off of what you see, like that was really, aside from the first drive of the game, that was their best, the offense's best series out there. And it just sucks all the life out of you. There was more than enough time for the Ravens to come back and score 2 touchdowns, but watching the offense, you weren't feeling confident. And then, they come back on the field, they can't snap the ball, and the concussion happens. And if I'm Lamar, like, I'm absolutely livid right now. Like, still absolutely just, I'm pissed at McCary and I'm pissed at the entire offensive line, because that didn't need to happen. If they actually had some competence on the offensive line and on the center position, Lamar doesn't get hurt there. Is there still a chance that, he steps up in the pocket, gets drilled to the ground and gets a concussion? Yeah. But like an injury like that, it didn't need to happen. And it only happened because of the yips, I guess you could say. I'm not buying, I said it already, but I'm not buying the excuse McCary gave of the Bills Mafia, the 20%, not even of the stadium being full, being that big of a factor. You're a professional football player. You should be able to deal with 6,700 people, let alone a full stadium. Not to get too far ahead, but yeah, game wasn't completely over when that pick six happened. But it really, it was almost like the life was just getting sucked out of the team. And that was a bad play by Lamar. I mean, again, if the previous play went a lot better and Phillips and Dobbins actually did their job the correct way, they probably have an easy touchdown. But that doesn't end up being the case. And Lamar has a bad read where he just stares down his receiver the entire time. And the defender on Buffalo, his name escapes me, but credit for him for, playing his zone perfectly, staring Lamar's eyes the whole time, staring his eyes down and going back all the way. And, it really says a lot when, the guy's going back over 100 yards and your quarterback has the best chance to catch him.
Yeah, that too. I mean, I really don't want to watch the play again, but I think Collinsworth said it right after it happened. You throw the pick, that sucks, but you cannot let this guy take it all the way back for a touchdown. It's completely unacceptable. So I don't know who had a chance and didn't put in effort. I don't know if that was the case at all, but if maybe it was just the perfect angle, the perfect storm where he had an easy pick six. I don't know. I really don't want to watch the play again, to be honest with you.
Justice Hill was running a little bit behind Lamar. Lamar was much closer to the guy. Really the only other person that had a chance to catch him was Boykin. But, simply put, the defender is faster than Boykin. We all know Boykin's not the fastest guy. So that was really the only other person that was around the ball when it happened that had a chance. The way the lanes cleared, it worked out well, obviously, for the defender there. It'll be interesting to see. I know Skura's a free agent, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do, how they address this. Bozeman was drafted as a center. I think it kind of says a lot through his first 3 seasons that they haven't played him there yet. Powers has certainly not held his own. I was hoping a lot. I was hoping a lot out of him, especially being the Mo Gaba pick, but I'm just not sold there yet. I do have an interesting question. I know this has nothing to do with the game. You go online and you look around the Ravens website. Nobody wants to make the mention. Everybody, seems to be hiding from the fact that the Ravens only have 5 draft picks in this upcoming draft. They had 7, but they gave up 2 when they traded Yannick Ngakoue, who I've done a completely 180 on in terms of whether or not they should bring him back. And I say this because Orlando Brown is coming up on a contract year. Since the Ravens, with them only having 5 picks, 6 if they don't, I think there might be a comp pick involved if they don't bring back Ngakoue. If there's a desperate team, because you basically know at this point, I'm assuming the Ravens aren't planning on paying Orlando Brown because they just gave Ronnie Stanley all that money. Let's say a desperate team, it only takes one idiot general manager in the NFL. I'm not saying that there's going to be an idiot like Bill O'Brien this year, but there might be one idiot general manager out there that is willing, that is interested, absolutely desperate for a left tackle on their team, but might be impressed by what they saw on film by Orlando Brown this year. If the Ravens have an opportunity to coup another late first or a second round pick by trading Orlando Brown, I know that would, weaken the offensive line in terms of next year, but in terms of, there's a lot that this team needs, and they don't have a lot of draft picks. There's going to be some moves they have to make in free agency, I think. And at certain positions like wide receiver, that might not always be easy to recruit people here. But would you be willing to listen to an offer like that for Orlando Brown if it means you get a pick in the first or second round?
I would, but you just mentioned it there. You're creating another hole to try to fill some other needs. And draft picks are never a sure thing. Orlando Brown Jr. is as close to a sure thing as we know. But you're right. It's a money thing. If they don't think they can afford to keep him and Stanley, then yeah, I think it's a pretty obvious scenario where you're going to try to trade him. But I think in all likelihood, they're going to get the full 4 years out of him. And then maybe you see a little sign and trade type of deal. They're not going to trade him with a year left on his contract. I think that would be, I wouldn't be 100% opposed to it. If you've got a team lined up and the deal is right and you like the return, then yeah, pull the trigger. But they did lose 2 picks with the Ngakoue trade, but I believe only one of them is for this year, and then the second-round pick for this year, and then a 5th-round pick the following year. So they're not in the same draft. They must have lost a.
I think it was a third. I think it was a third and 5th. But yeah, I think you're right about one of them being next year.
So they must have lost their other pick somewhere along the road. And look, we'll go to the defensive side of the ball. Not just Ngakoue. What happens with Matt Judon? One of those guys, both of those guys might not be here. Like you said, you're definitely going to get a comp pick for at least one of those guys. So they will roll in to draft weekend with more than 5 picks. I think that's a safe bet, but still, it's not comfortable given just how many needs you feel like you have right now.
What's funny you say that too about the battle between deciding whether or not you want to bring Judon or Ngakoue back. Hell, Pernell McPhee over the last month and a half has been their best pass rusher, and they were paying him pennies. So if he's interested in coming back, I would definitely explore that option. And if you can still get Tyus Bowser relatively cheap, bring both those guys back, because really the only guy you're going to have at the pass rusher position was a guy that was a healthy scratch, Jalen Ferguson. And, Judon and Ngakoue might price themselves out of Baltimore. So, especially after what you saw from Ngakoue this year, and I get that he was a late addition and he didn't have the offseason to get in the playbook, let alone a regular offseason in general with COVID going on. But man, you give up 2 draft picks for a guy that gives you 3 sacks in like 8 or 9 games. That's very disappointing. It's very, frustrating too, especially given the needs there and what they were able to do trading for Marcus Peters midway through the season last year. So DaCosta so far on midway through, the season trades is 1 for 2 in my book. Ngakoue had 5 sacks this year before he arrived in Baltimore, and they did not see that production. And it's just unfortunate because I was excited when they made that trade.
I don't think it's that bad of a trade. And I know he didn't perform, but look at what they gave up. It's 2 picks from 2 separate drafts, 3rd round and a 5th round. We've seen how, hot of a commodity pass rushers can be in this league, especially in trades. And, maybe some of these other guys are much better and have been for their entire career than Ngakoue, and they get a better return. But compared to the Marcus Peters deal, compared to the trade in the offseason to get Calais Campbell, is this a bigger price to pay? Absolutely. Nothing is going to look good compared to those 2 trades because they were absolute steals. They were highway robbery, both of them. But you evaluate the Ngakoue trade by itself. Say what you want about what he did when he got here. The production wasn't there. I agree with you. But the price they paid, really not that bad. And honestly, I think you go back and you ask any GM, would you give up a 3rd round and a 5th round from 2 separate drafts for a guy with Ngakoue's track record? I think that's a no-brainer move for any team that is in need of a pass rush. It's really not that high of a price to pay. Again, did not pay off. He didn't produce. But as far as the price tag given up, I cannot knock it at all. DaCosta made the right move at the time.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what his market value is, because I really have no idea after he puts up 5 sacks early on and essentially does nothing with the Ravens. I don't know what his market value is going to be. And maybe the Ravens get lucky in that instance. Maybe it's not that high. And with the lowered salary cap, I've heard some people say, maybe that ends up being in the Ravens' favor. And it's a situation where maybe they bring it back on another 1-year deal to kind of prove himself again. Who knows? But, I'm very curious to see what other teams are willing to give him.
We'll circle back to the defense, but finishing up on offense here, again, the theme here, only finished with 3 points, so many missed opportunities. The pick 6 could have been a touchdown right before it. Justin Tucker misses 2 field goals. Dobbins had a couple drops. One that I didn't mention, when Tyler Huntley comes into the game, I felt good for him. It's a really strange situation to be in, to come into a game in the playoffs, the divisional round. Your team down 14, so you're still technically in it with the time on the clock, but you're just not equipped to really make this comeback. And, he's thrown into the fire as a rookie. I was happy for him that he got out there and made some plays and almost came up with a touchdown drive, but he missed. Oh, man, Hollywood had the defender beat by a mile. He was wide open, and Huntley made the throw, and I don't know if it was the wind or he was off base or a little bit of both, but just way over the reach of Hollywood. Would have been an easy touchdown right there that would have cut it to a 1-possession game. And then late, hit Dobbins on what could have been a touchdown, or at least would have got him down inside the 2 or the 1, and Dobbins just let it bounce off his chest. So many missed opportunities. That's the point. And it kind of just goes to show, I think you might have even said this earlier, you can dominate time of possession. You can outgain your opponent. Lamar had better stats than Josh Allen halfway through this game. You can do all of that. But if you don't play a clean game, it's going to come back to hurt you, especially in the playoffs. So the turnover, the penalties, those were the difference. The Ravens got called 8 times. Bills got called 2 times. Combine that with the pick 6. That's the difference for me. And I don't say that to blame the refs, by the way. Just wanted to point out that there was a disparity.
Yeah, and I'll be honest. I mean, once the pick 6 happened, and as soon as I was up early Sunday morning, and I'd be up early for work. As soon as Lamar was out, I turned the game off and saw the Huntley highlights this morning as I was getting ready for the podcast. And I definitely think he should be given every opportunity for the backup job next season. I mean, you already released RG3. I mean, we saw that coming. McSorley, he looked decent in both the times he's played in preseason games, and he looked decent in that Steelers game too before he got injured. But it'll be interesting to see what happens given the fact that Huntley is a very similar quarterback to Lamar Jackson and has looked good. And I think a little bit more of a sample size than McSorley. I mean, Huntley, attempted 13 passes on Saturday night. So that's kind of a very small, backup quarterback storyline. It's tiny compared to what you're focusing on throughout the offseason. But I do think that Huntley has certainly earned the right to compete for that backup job, along with McSorley in training camp behind Lamar Jackson this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, RG3 out. I think we all could have seen that coming. Just not worth it to pay him that much money to be the backup, especially when he's honestly not that good. I mean, he had his moments.
Can't stay healthy either.
Yeah, can't stay healthy, and even when he was healthy, just not good at all. Not worth the price tag. If you're going to get that kind of performance out of your backup, I'd much rather pay him, a couple $100,000 instead of $2 million to go in there and do the same thing, or maybe even better. So I like what I saw from McSorley and Huntley enough to say, hey, those two guys are going to compete for the backup role. Maybe they carry 3 again like they have the past couple of years. Who knows? Could always bring someone else in off the street. You never know. But it is something to keep an eye on because RG3 is out and probably did a lot behind the scenes, helped mold Lamar, guide him along in the very formative years of his career. And just by all accounts, a great guy and a great teammate. So you wish him well, obviously.
I have a question for you. It's not game related. I don't know if you're planning on touching on this later, but the fact that the Ravens had the first overall rushing offense again, and they were dead last in passing. I mean, that is clearly, I think we can both agree that that's the biggest area that the offense needs to improve on this offseason. But, I think it said a lot to me after the game, or I guess Willie talked after the game and Marquise talked the next day. Both of them, I mean, Willie's not sure if he's going to be here next year. He's an unrestricted free agent, but both of them kind of said that, the Ravens need to be more diverse on offense in the passing game. So how, in order for the Ravens to take that, now that they've gotten over that first hump in the playoffs, the next step is obviously, get over to the divisional round and at least get to the AFC Championship. If they are going to do that, how would you attack this offseason in terms of developing this passing game more?
A lot of factors, you're right. And it starts up front. Got to have the right blocking. But for the most part this year, I think you saw good enough offensive line play. And then, obviously you're expecting to have 2 big pieces back, not just in your run blocking scheme, but pass blocking too. Ronnie Stanley, phenomenal pass protection. But, getting some better interior offensive linemen has to be the goal. That's not just going to benefit the pass game. It's going to benefit the run game. It's going to benefit all of it. So that's a move that needs to be made. Everyone's screaming for a number 1 wide receiver. I don't disagree. It just comes down to the price tag. And look who's available. So everyone's screaming about Allen Robinson, but it feels like deja vu. I thought we were screaming about Allen Robinson 3 years ago when the Ravens didn't sign him day one of free agency, and the entire fan base flipped their lid and said, why didn't you spend half of your cap space on Allen Robinson and get Joe Flacco an actual receiver? Well, because he was so damn expensive and we didn't have the cap space. So does he fit in better now money-wise than he did 3 years ago? Probably. But still, you got to ask yourself what the price tag is, and is it worth it? So that leads me to point 3, the third part of the equation. if you do get a number one wide receiver in free agency, Allen Robinson, whoever, when he comes in, are you guaranteeing that he's actually going to be utilized? That's the biggest thing. So, and that comes down to Greg Roman. So Greg Roman, I definitely wanted to bring him up. We talked about him last week. I gave him a lot of credit in the Tennessee game, said that he made big adjustments at halftime, helped jumpstart that offense, get them to where they needed to be, and ultimately was a big factor in the Ravens winning that game. This week, again, adjustments were made at the half. On the drive that ended in the pick six, the Ravens were moving the ball well. They were calling different offensive plays. They looked completely different than they did in the first half. The run was starting to get sniffed out by the Bills. They were stacking the box. They were getting a good pass rush. Lamar was under duress. What does Greg Roman dial up? Lamar gets a snap, 1, 2, 3 seconds tops, the ball's out. No looking downfield, trying to make all the reads. Make the primary read. Is he open? 5-yard pass, 6-yard pass, that sort of thing. Not the same as what we saw last week with let's get our fullback Ricard out in the flat and hit him for a little 5-yard pass. A little bit different than that. You're hitting actual receivers on quick slants and whatnot, quick button hooks, turnarounds, stuff like that. A little bit different, but still same mentality. Get the ball out quick, get the defense to back off. Even it mixed in at one point, maybe a couple times, a run-pass option play. We've seen the read option on the runs. Is Lamar going to keep it? Is he going to hand it off to the running back? Well, how about the RPO? Is he going to hand it off, or is he going to keep it and throw it from the pocket? You can say what you want about Greg Roman. There's many that are calling for his head. Not surprising. He's the scapegoat. He was earlier this season. We all know this fan base does not want to blame Lamar Jackson at all. They don't want to blame the players at all, so they're always going to go the easy route and say, get rid of the head coach, get rid of the coordinator, like that's going to fix everything. Newsflash, it's not going to fix everything. You can hate Greg Roman all you want. I think there's plenty to not like about him. The disparity between the run game and the pass game, not good. But at the end of the day, you can't use the excuse that his in-game adjustments are reason for firing him. You just can't. It was an issue earlier this year. It was an issue in the playoffs last year. But in the 2 playoff games this year, the 2 biggest games of the year, he did his job. He didn't panic. He didn't soil himself like he did last year. And he called the game that was necessary to win. And when it came down to the nitty-gritty, the team didn't execute. How many times do we have to say it? The offensive line didn't block. Lamar throws a pick 6. Last time I checked, Greg Roman doesn't suit up and throw that pass in the end zone. Last time I checked, Greg Roman doesn't put on pads and get assigned to block Jerry Hughes on the offensive line. He calls the plays. Tyree Phillips is supposed to play his assignment. Lamar, as a quarterback, is supposed to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't throw this ball. Not just in this game, other games this year, he's thrown boneheaded interceptions. That's not Greg Roman. I'm sorry. It's just not. It comes down to execution. I'm not going to blame it all on Greg Roman. I'm not going to blame it all on the players. It's a little bit of both. So at the end of the day, I guess in summation, I want the Ravens to keep Greg Roman. Some people aren't going to like that. A lot of people are going to heavily disagree. But you have to know that the grass is not greener on the other side. Look at the Ravens' history at offensive coordinator. Greg Roman and Gary Kubiak, 2 best offensive coordinators they've had in years, maybe in franchise history. And I think, again, I'm going to say this, some people are going to get angry, Greg Roman might be the best offensive coordinator you've ever had. I said it. Gary Kubiak was here for 1 year. Did some good things for Lamar or for Joe Flacco in that offense. It was a new wrinkle to Flacco at that point in his career. They did good things. I'm not denying that. But look at the historic run game that Greg Roman concocted. 2 straight years. It wasn't a flash in the pan. It wasn't 1 year. 2 years. You could argue he's better. He's been a better offensive coordinator than Gary Kubiak in the impact that he's had. Other than them, who do we have? Cam Cameron, Mark Trestman, Marty Mornhinweg, you really want to try to go out there and get another offensive coordinator and try your luck and hope that it's a guy that's at least as good as Greg Roman and hopefully better. Greg Roman is a quality offensive coordinator, and those guys don't grow on trees.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, Roman's not the guy that's going out there and, it's not him snapping the ball underneath Lamar's feet and into the end zone. It's not him missing blocks and leading to sacks. It's not him dropping passes of that, But yeah, I mean, and people, I think we forget sometimes too that, it took the Ravens with, multiple Hall of Famers on their defense and, with their new quarterback, Joe Flacco at the time, it took that squad 5 years to finally get to the Super Bowl and make it. I mean, there were 4 consecutive postseasons where ultimately they didn't end up where they wanted to go. And at the end of the day, you hear all the time, but you have a 1 out of 32 chance of being fully satisfied at the end of the season. So it's there are some problems. I mean, the Joe Flacco and those teams certainly had some flaws, a lot different flaws than what this team has right now. I mean, I think the common denominator between them is the passing game. And honestly, Flacco's passing game, I think, was better than the passing game is, to this point in terms of just the yardage total that he was throwing for. But there's still time to make the necessary adjustments this offseason for another next year. And who knows, the Ravens, they fired Cam Cameron before they won the Super Bowl. They might run into a situation where they struck gold again and fire. I'm not saying I wish this happens, but God only knows Greg Roman could be fired mid-season, and that ends up being the best thing that ever happened for Lamar Jackson. And we have no idea what's going to happen. But the point we're trying to make here is they're 3 years into this. Lamar is only 2 full seasons as a starter. It is too early to just jump ship. Because you're right. I mean, a lot of fans think Roman and the coaching staff are the problem. I've heard a lot of the same, and also some about Lamar Jackson being the problem. I mean, a lot of people want Deshaun Watson so badly since the Texans are apparently willing to move him this offseason. I think Lamar Jackson has the exact same amount of playoff wins that Watson does. They both have 1 win between the two. So, or in between both of them, they each have 1 playoff win apiece. So we're only 2.5 full years into this system. The Ravens are all in, and it's too soon. They're too far in, and it's too soon to just completely abandon it right now and go in another direction. This is a still developing story. The script is not yet written. And I think there is also something to be said. I mean, we talk about Lamar Jackson regressing with air quotes this offseason or this season. They didn't even have a full offseason to do anything really. And who knows what the offseason is going to hold this year. I think it would be beneficial for Lamar to maybe not ask Josh Allen directly, but maybe like talk to people around the league to figure out what the hell he did to make him such a great thrower this season. I'm not shitting on Lamar in terms of him being a bad passer or anything. And I think having a guy like Stephon Diggs certainly helps, but I think we saw the jump that Lamar took from year 1 to year 2 under a normal offseason where he did all that work. He wasn't able to do as much this offseason. I think that the coaches he was working with said they did like 10% of the work they actually did last year. They couldn't meet. So again, with all the restrictions, we don't know how things are going to be. We don't know if the NFL is going to change they're already talking about doing that and removing a bunch of stuff. But hopefully things are a lot more normal this summer. Lamar can get with his coaches and his players more, and we'll see, more of a jump. Maybe it's not the same type of jump we saw from year 1 to year 2, but we see some improvement there. And the point I'm trying to make is, whether it's Roman or your problems are with Lamar, this team is too young and it's way too early to be giving up on everybody just yet.
You're right, Lamar not having enough time to work in the offseason. You hope that a full offseason would help him a lot, because it obviously did before last year, the 2019 offseason. But really, I mean, you want him to be a better player, and he'll tell you that he can grow even more. But after that MVP season, I mean, how much better can it get? The MVP, dynamic runner, led the league in passing touchdowns from the pocket. Are we expecting that every year? No. I mean, we were expecting quality. And I thought you got quality play out of him this year. You got winning football out of him.
The only thing I would like to see in terms of him improving the passing game, not to cut you off, I would like to see him eclipse 200 passing yards a lot more often than what he did this year. And I think Willie Snead and Marquise Brown spoke to that. It's more about balancing it more. They need more balance on offense. And I think if they do that, he'll throw over 200 more.
He needs more attempts then. I mean, he's got games where he's throwing, 17, 16 passes? Less than 20 passes? You give him more attempts then. So I don't know. I think he's fine enough. I am by no means one of these people that thinks that he can't, successfully have a career in this league because he can't pass. That I don't know where that mindset comes from. He literally led the league in passing touchdowns last year. Where are we getting this from? The Tennessee playoff game this year, look it up. ESPN, all these, the Pro Football Focus, they have their analytics and their throw charts, their completion charts, shows where all the completions and incompletions were on the field. Look it up for the Titans game. 80-90% of his completions were outside the numbers or on the numbers, not in the middle of the field, my point. So I keep hearing, he can only throw across the middle. He can't throw outside the numbers. Look at the Tennessee game. He threw to the sideline the entire game. Last thing on Greg Roman here. And I think the continuity factor has to be mentioned because we talk about Joe Flacco. To start his career, 5 years, 5 different offensive coordinators, something like that. Just no continuity, no chance to grow year to year with the same guy. I think it's only going to help Lamar in the long run to work with the same guy year to year. And not just Lamar, the entire offense. All these guys working with the same offensive coordinator. It's not good when you're replacing them year after year after year. One more thing that just popped in my head, and people want to get on John Harbaugh. He's too loyal, that he's loyal to a fault, and that he holds on to bad coaches. Name me another head coach that's fired an offensive coordinator midseason twice in their career. Name me a head coach that did it in the middle of a season where you knew you were competing for a Super Bowl. Fired Cam Cameron in the middle of a Super Bowl year. They had, 9 wins at the time they fired him? You're going to the postseason. They fired their offensive coordinator. That just doesn't happen. Later on, they fired Mark Trestman in the middle of the season. What other head coach has done that twice in their tenure? So I don't understand this. He's too loyal to a fault. He's done some pretty wild stuff as far as firing guys midseason. I'll say that much. But defensive side of the ball, let's talk about something positive. If there's one thing you can take away from this game as a positive, this defense was outstanding. They came up big in the Tennessee game. They came up just as big here in the Buffalo game. Just allowed 10 points to the Bills' offense. High-flying, a dangerous pass attack that we heard all this. How are they going to stop Stephon Diggs? How are they going to stop Cole Beasley, great possession receiver, John Brown, all these guys? Those guys made some plays. Maybe not Cole Beasley. He was actually he ended the game with no receptions, was only targeted twice. I thought for sure he was going to be a bigger factor, but the Ravens were able to limit him. Stephon Diggs, 8 receptions for 106 yards. He had himself a game. But other than that, Ravens just overall did a great job on defense, and the Bills didn't even attempt to get a run game going. I mean, they started the game with 20 straight passes, something, or they went the entire first half, only ran the ball twice or 3 times or something. Just crazy. And my big takeaway here, while we're on the subject of offseason stuff, the Ravens invested a lot of money in the offseason and in the midseason into this defense. Marcus Peters got a contract. Marlon Humphrey got a contract. They gave up draft capital to get Calais Campbell, and then they gave him a restructured contract. There's money invested on the defensive side of the ball. There's draft picks invested on the defensive side of the ball. Patrick Queen, your first-round pick, was a defensive player. And in the biggest moment, they performed for you. 2 playoff games, 2 biggest games of the year, they came up big, and they did their job to the fullest. Couldn't have done a better job, in my opinion, in both games. So, I think I heard some people earlier this year. I haven't heard it since the loss. Obviously, there's plenty of other stuff that has the fan base frustrated. But I heard people saying there's too much money invested in this defense. They're not performing well. I heard that at times this year. Well, I don't want to hear that at all this offseason, that they invested too much money in this defense. Because at the end of the day, the defense came up big and did what they needed to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I have the list of the, unrestricted free agents on the defensive side of the ball, and it's, aside from Derek Wolfe and, a guy like Tyus Bowser, who plays a little bit of both outside and inside linebacker, and then Jihad Ward, it's all outside linebackers. And I mean, last off season, that was a huge need. And they midway through the season, they used the franchise tag on Judon, obviously, and then they were able to make a move midway through the season. And they did take some swings. I mean, they took 2 swings with Judon and Ngakoue there, and they got okay production out of Judon, but there were stretches throughout the season where he seemed to be a complete ghost in the pass rushing. So, and in terms of, I would love for them to bring a guy like Derek Wolfe back, but I mean, we forget too that, Brandon Williams, I believe, is coming up on a contract year, and his price is not cheap either. So I'm almost wondering if, in order to give themselves a shot at getting a guy like Wolfe and a pass rusher, maybe they decide to move on from Brandon Williams. I don't know. But you feel good that at least you got what looks to be a solid draft pick in Patrick Queen, who had a good year. You've got LJ Fort under contract next year as well. I believe Chris Ford is a restricted free agent, so I'm assuming they can get him back. Your secondary is pretty much, you really don't need to touch the secondary. I mean, you probably, in terms of depth, it's always a good idea to draft, maybe a corner or another safety just to have bodies there. And Anthony Levine's another guy that's a free agent. But for the most part, the secondary needs minimal, attention this offseason, aside from adding more depth there. So the attention then, I mean, the nice thing is, while we talk about offense, needing a offensive lineman, receivers, maybe a third tight end, maybe. I mean, the good news is on defense, most of your attention should be going towards the pass rush. But again, the Ravens aren't just this team that's going to take a pick or draft a guy just based on need. They're going to consider the full picture and getting the best player available and that types of things. And if one of those guys ends up being a pass rusher early, then great. But again, still taking that swing early in the first 3 rounds, like we see with Jalen Ferguson, doesn't always pan out. So, it's, again, we're going into the offseason where pass catcher and pass rusher are perhaps the biggest needs. And, we're coming up on, where there's already rumors about a Lamar extension coming up. The salary cap is not going to be as friendly coming up in future years. So you're hoping that whatever swings they do take this offseason don't end up being misses. But, some of them are. It's just how the NFL works.
And then one last thing on the defense, Wink Martindale, another great year as the defensive coordinator. He's as attractive as ever to fill a head coaching vacancy. Haven't heard anything about him getting interview requests, not while their season was going on or their postseason run. Now that they're done, maybe those offers will come in, but we'll see. I mean, look, 3 straight years leading a top 5 defense in the league. I know the league, GMs and owners around the league have kind of shifted their mindset towards hiring more offensive-minded people, but still see defensive-minded guys get head coaching jobs. Vic Fangio comes to mind. I think Wink Martindale is definitely deserving of getting a shot to lead a team. So I hope he doesn't leave, because he's been just phenomenal as a defensive coordinator. He's up there with Rex Ryan in terms of the best in franchise history, in my opinion. Can call that a hot take if you want. I think the numbers prove it. Top 5 defense the last 3 years. And, Martindale, he's got talent on these defenses, but he's got none of them are Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, Haloti Ngata.
The thing that the Ravens have going for keeping Martindale in terms of, the head coaching opportunities is, 1, he coaches defense, not offense. He's not an offensive coach. And 2, from what I've heard, he has no relationship with Sean McVay, and anybody that's friends with Sean McVay is getting a head coaching job the past couple of years, it seems like. So in terms of keeping Martindale, those are 2 things the Ravens have going for him.
Well, I've certainly got my fingers crossed, because I think losing him You could retain all the personnel from this year and even add to it, but you bring another defensive coordinator in, I don't know if you get the same results. I just think he really makes that much of difference. And we're talking about pass rush and the need that you have at pass rush. How much of that glaring need, how much of the weakness has Wink Martindale been responsible for hiding and masking through his schemes? We always talk about it. They blitz more than anyone. I mean, we know they have to blitz because they can't really get pressure just sending 4 guys, but still, I really think that if he is not the defensive coordinator for this team, you're going to see an immediate difference. And before we quickly give some predictions for the championship round, one more guy, this made news late last night, is out in Baltimore. We knew this was coming. Still kind of a sad thing to see just because of how lovable this player was. But Mark Ingram has been released by the Ravens. They'll save $5 million against the cap this year by doing so. It was a no-brainer decision. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, definitely the more productive running backs this year. And it even got to the point where the Ravens were so healthy as a team in the playoffs that Mark Ingram was a healthy scratch. If you had other guys elsewhere that were injured, Ingram would have been active. But the team was so healthy overall, it's a numbers game. There's no reason to have him active. So it just worked out that way. But you can't take away the impact that he had. Can't take away the season he had in 2019. Heck of a season for him to be, in this league for quite some time prior to that, and then to have that kind of production at that point in his career. It was just really fun to watch. Great personality. Can't say enough nice things about this guy. Kind of what I was saying about RG3 earlier. And it sucks not you're not gonna have him on the sidelines, not gonna have that energy, all the great moments, the social media stuff, but a move that needed to be done.
Yeah, something tells me too that Dobbins might be a guy that kind of takes over for the energy guy. He seems like a guy that plays with a lot of passion, and I could see him being a future leader on the offense, along with Lamar and guys like that. I think the second year is certainly gonna get an opportunity to do that as the lead back. But yeah, I mean, I give I've said it before on the podcast, but I give Ingram so much credit for not being a distraction and being a class act in terms of how he handled the whole healthy scratch demotion. And despite that, he still continued to do his normal sideline antics. I mean, you watch Ravens wide or anything like that, he's just always, regardless if he's on the field or not, just dancing and firing the guys up, being the guy that's going to reassure them and all that stuff. So I give him all the credit in the world. That certainly couldn't have been easy, especially considering he's a running back in his 30s, and we all know that once running backs reach that, it's a very limited amount of time for them in their careers. So I just hope that he's technically eligible to be signed by anybody now, but I hope he can get another opportunity for at least to compete and get in the playoffs before he calls it a career. But there will be a team that could use his services this offseason, that's for sure.
Yeah, he won't be on the market for long. He's in his 30s. He's been in the league a long time, but his mileage is not that high. I mean, he played backup in New Orleans for a long time, or a change of pace running back. His mileage is of a running back maybe 3-4 years younger than him. So he'll definitely land somewhere, and hopefully it's with a contender, and he can continue to be the hype man somewhere else. I'm going to miss him, though, because we can go back to calling it Ravens Wired. For the last 2 years, I've been calling it the Mark Ingram Show. Let's end things here. Championship round, 2 good games. We both went 4-0 last week, by the way. We've been very good overall in the postseason. I think I'm 9-1. You're 8-2. Not to brag or anything, but we've been pretty good overall. So both of our Super Bowl picks are still alive, and I think you can, if you've been listening the last couple of weeks, you can kind of predict where we're going. Let's start with Buffalo and Kansas City. This is the game that actually has a wrinkle to it. Pat Mahomes with a concussion, some question marks surrounding him. I think he'll end up playing. I don't really see why not, unless something strange happens this week. He's in line to return and play. Assuming he plays, we'll base our picks off of that. Buffalo was my pick to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. I'm going to stick with that. I think even if Mahomes plays, I like Buffalo here. You know, they just been solid. They didn't have their best game against the Ravens offensively, but they played clean games so far in the postseason. And you look at the Chiefs, once again, I think you go back all the way to Halloween, they have not covered a game in all these wins. They do not put away teams. They didn't put away bad teams in the regular season, and they couldn't put away a Browns team that they were 10-point favorites over. You know, Mahomes going down has an impact on that, but even when he was healthy and in the game, the Browns were hanging around. They were making the game. They weren't going away quietly. So I just think this Chiefs team has been flirting with disaster way too much, and the Bills are going to be the best team they've faced in a long time. And if they're not careful, they might get smacked around a little bit, and the Bills could win this one. It will not be a runaway game either way. It's going to be close down to the end. Team that makes the least amount of mistakes will win, obviously. But I'm sticking with the Bills as my AFC pick. I'm rolling with them.
And shout out to the Bills Mafia, by the way, for such a classy gesture to donate all the money that they did to one of Lamar Jackson's charities. I have a couple friends that are Bills fans. I have nothing bad to say about that fan base. I hope I can witness a game up at Orchard Park one day and see somebody get smashed through a table. All that good stuff. Definitely much more. I know the Titans fans didn't do any of the antics, but the players did, but definitely more a classy gesture than what we saw in Tennessee a week ago. I'm going to go. You see, for me, I'm going to be rooting for Buffalo. And it's certainly a wrinkle. You're right. My picks are going to be going, if Mahomes is out, the Bills will win. If Mahomes plays, the Chiefs are going to win. I'm leaning, obviously I expect Mahomes to play. I mean, I don't even think he was actually diagnosed with a concussion. I think it was more of a nerve problem. That does sound pretty painful though. And somebody said that a spinal concussion is I think is what he ended up with. It's some nerve issue. It sounds painful. Maybe they just give him a shot of cortisone or whatever, and he plays through it. But assuming he plays, I'm going Kansas City, but I will be the biggest Bills fan there is on Sunday.
Yeah, Bills Mafia, the Bills, the hardest team to hate. They knock you out of the playoffs, and you're just, I still love these guys. Like, you can't hate them. The players, the fans, they're just awesome all around. And it feels like Stockholm syndrome. They just beat you up, kidnapped you, embarrassed you on prime time in the playoffs. And I love these guys. They're my favorite team, my second favorite team. So NFC side, another great game. Brady versus Rodgers, two of the best to ever do it. Great matchup here. Rodgers, I think the first time since he's been there that Green Bay's hosting the NFC Championship. Won't be full capacity, though, but they do have fans in attendance. Green Bay was my pick to win the entire thing. I have them beating the Bills in the Super Bowl, so I'm rolling with Green Bay. I think it's going to be a great game, a different wrinkle to look out for here. Aaron Jones, Green Bay running back, how does he do against the Tampa Bay run defense? They're extremely good against the run. I think they're the best run defense in the league, and they might be getting one of their best players back, Vita Vea. He might be coming back off IR this week. He's eligible to return. So even without him, they're extremely good. With him, even in some capacity, they might be just downright impossible to run against. So if they can make Green Bay one-dimensional, they've got a shot. But when it comes down to it, what other quarterback besides Rodgers would you want in a situation where your team has been made one-dimensional? If there's a quarterback you want in this league where all you can do is throw the ball 100% of the time, it's either Mahomes or Rodgers, and I think I'm going to go with Rodgers just because of the experience. I'm rolling with Green Bay. I think this is their year overall to win it all.
Yeah, and the Buccaneers, and I forgot, they dominated the Packers pretty handily back on October 18, 38-10. I couldn't remember if they had met in the regular season or not. And that just kind of goes to show, I mean, Rodgers and Breeze, I mean, two guys that have been in the league since the early 2000s, Each of them only have one Super Bowl ring, and both of those happened over a decade ago. I mean, we feel bad about right now the Ravens are hurting because they haven't won, or the Ravens fan base is kind of hurt because they haven't won a Super Bowl in almost a decade, and let alone having Lamar Jackson as your MVP. I mean, Rodgers and Breeze, two sure to be future Hall of Famers, each of them only have one championship. It just goes to show how hard it is to reach the Super Bowl. And, you said Green Bay, you're right there hosting their first NFC championship game in the Rodgers era. That's crazy. I thought that would have happened by now. I'm going to pick Green Bay as well. I think giving home field advantage certainly plays a role. Brady has not looked particularly good or particularly impressive in cold weather games this year. See the Chicago game and other examples as well. I think it will be close. It should be I think it'll be the better game of the two, if I had to guess. If I were up to me, I would have put this game as the night game, but I know they alternate those every year. But I'm going to go Green Bay, and we get the Mahomes and Rodgers Super Bowl that the NFL is just dying to have. And if they get Mahomes and Brady, then that works for them too. But there's a selfish part of me that kind of wants to root for Brady and the Bucs, but I'm going to go with Green Bay to win the game here and get to the second Super Bowl of Aaron Rodgers' career.
And how cool is it, Brady being in the NFC for this maybe the last year of his career? I don't know. I mean, I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. You watch him play, he just defies all science and logic with how he's held up and remained healthy and good this late in his career. Especially going up against a guy like Breeze in that game. And Breeze, he's banged up this year, the rib injury. That's really tough to play through and come back from, but just can't push the ball down the field. He can't throw more than 10 yards. And you watch Brady, he could still throw strikes down the field. They don't do it all the time, but they play to his strengths. But still, I mean, he just looks like a guy that's 5 years younger, 6 years younger. But it's so cool that he's in the NFC for this back end of his career, and all the great quarterbacks that are over there. We get some of these matchups, Brady versus Breeze, Brady versus Rodgers in the postseason. It's like, it feels right. Before we never would have seen those matchups unless they met in the Super Bowl. Matchups with stakes this high. They could have met in the regular season, but it's whatever. It doesn't mean as much. So all those years we saw Brady battle with, Peyton Manning in the AFC. It's really cool to see, a Roethlisberger, Phil Rivers a couple times. NFC side, these past 2 weeks, these matchups, quarterback-wise, have been really a treat for NFL fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's regardless of what the Super Bowl matchup is. I mean, you've got 4 teams here. Darlings such as Mahomes and Brady and Rodgers, and the Bills are this lovable team too. I think if you're not a Kansas City Chiefs fan, you pretty much hate them. But going around all of these teams, it's really hard to dislike any of them. So that'll be nice going into the Super Bowl. Is no matter what. I mean, if the Chiefs make it, we'll be rooting against them, but we'll have a good story regardless. We'll either have Mahomes versus Brady or Rodgers, or we'll have either of those two guys versus this Bills team that let alone being in the playoffs, hasn't made it this far in decades and hasn't ever they've reached Super Bowl, haven't won one, but it'd be quite a story to see them finally overcome that obstacle in 20 years after barely even doing anything. So it's an exciting conference championship weekend. It's also nice too that up to this point there really haven't been too many COVID issues. Knock on wood. Let me do that real quick in the playoffs. So hopefully that continues, and I'm looking forward to sitting down Sunday, getting whatever takeout options me and Tyler decide to get, and just watching the magic unfold. It's hard to believe, as it always is, that the football season's almost over. It flies by so quickly, and I think this year more than other years, just based off how boring the world is right now, it'll be tougher than ever to say goodbye to the NFL season.
That's episode 137. We won't have anything Ravens next week. No Ravens game, unfortunately, but we'll be here. I'll be here at least. I don't know what we're going to do. I'll be here at least. Episode for you. We'll talk about the championship round, a little preview of the Super Bowl, more on the Ravens offseason, all that stuff. And now that the Ravens are done, start gearing up for baseball, Orioles offseason happenings, and Maryland basketball, which has not been discussed at all on this podcast so far this season. Appreciate you guys for rocking with us through the entire Ravens season. Orioles fans out there, keep listening. We're going to be talking about them. We podcast all year round. We're not just a Ravens podcast. Stay tuned. Appreciate you guys, and we'll be right back here next week for episode 138.